When it's springtime on the prairies, it's time to barbecue. And you can buy a lot of sauce to slap upon your do. But if you want the homemade touch, then step right up and watch. I'll teach you how to make a juicy apple maple sauce. Well, that's a pretty bad song, but oh well. Today we're going to make homemade barbecue sauce because we are heading closer and closer to that barbecue season. So let's make some apple maple barbecue sauce. I'm going to move the camera over now so you can see what's happening in the bowl, because you don't want to watch me dance a jig or just nodding my head up and down and waving my hands around. So let's get to it, shall we? Alright, so you're going to need a bowl. Medium-sized bowl is fine. And what ingredients are you going to need? Well, you're going to want a ½ cup of applesauce. Now, I'm using unsweetened applesauce, but if you prefer a little sweeter barbecue sauce, you can use sweetened applesauce. But you want a very fine ground applesauce. You don't want anything chunky, because we are making something you want to be able to brush onto your steaks, etc. This is actually quite good on pork chops too. So, ½ cup of applesauce. You're going to want a ½ cup of ketchup. Now, whatever brand you prefer. I tend to stick with name brands when it comes to ketchup. I find the no-name brands and the off brands not quite to be not quite as good. So I usually use Heinz, but French's is also very good. But whatever your preferred brand of ketchup is, that'll work just fine. Then you're going to want, set that there, 1 tablespoon of prepared mustard. Pardon the rude noises my French's is making, but we've all been there and done that. So 1 tablespoon of prepared mustard. If you don't have one of these little spatulas, I really encourage you to invest in one. They're so handy. Big spatulas are great for big things, but these little spatulas just come in so handy for the smaller jobs. Come on, say, come on, mustard, we want you out of there. Alrighty. It's about as much of that as I'm going to get out, I think. Oops, still a fair bit on the side here. Let's get that off. Then you're going to want 2 tablespoons of white vinegar, or if you prefer, you can use apple cider vinegar. I'm using white vinegar. Just mainly because that's what I had on hand. We're going to mix that together. You're saying, well, that doesn't look much like a barbecue sauce to me. It just looks like a bit of a muck. Alrighty, to that we are going to add a ½ cup of apple juice. I'm using unsweetened apple juice, but again, depending on how sweet you like your barbecue sauce, you can use sweetened apple juice if you prefer. And we're going to blend that together. I probably should have used a little bit bigger bowl just to make it easier to mix without having to worry about slopping. But this is the bowl I picked, so I'm going to have to live with it. Alright. Now, to that we are going to add a ½ teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce. Oop. I have Worcestershire sauce my counter as well here. There we go. And then we want, now if you don't have maple syrup, don't panic. It will be a different flavor, but you can use 2 tablespoons of honey instead. There's 1, 2. Now if you live in Canada, this is my preferred brand of maple syrup here. And it's put out by Loblaws. It's President's Choice, 100% pure maple syrup. And it sells for about $10 a bottle. I think they have it on sale right at this time for $8.95, so $1 off basically. But great maple syrup. Alrighty, we'll blend that in. Now that looks pretty runny, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, now we're going to add 2 tablespoons of onion powder. Now if you want chunky barbecue sauce, you could just do a couple tablespoons of fine ground onion. And we're adding 1.5 teaspoons chili powder. Alrighty, I'm going to set this aside now. And we want 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now if you plan ahead, what you can do, if you're planning, quite a bit ahead, if you end up emptying a ketchup bottle, or if you go to the dollar store and buy a squeeze bottle, you have something to put this in. I've pre-labeled a container here, but I have a feeling that I have more barbecue sauce than is going to fit in the container. I also noticed I put the label on the wrong side of the lid, so that won't work very well. Now, this is going to need to be thickened up a bit, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit at a time. I'm going to start with a tablespoon and we'll see where it goes from there, of cornstarch. Now if you want to use a blender to mix this with, that'll work just fine. As you know, I tend to be the old-fashioned kind of guy and do things by hand, but there's nothing wrong at all with using an electric whip or a blender. That would work great. I'll put in about another 1/2 tablespoon there. Now if you really want to thicken this up, now that there's cornstarch in there, you could put it on the stove and bring it to a low boil. And hold it there for about 5 minutes and it'll thicken right up nicely for you. But this is the way I usually do it, and I'll put it in the fridge. That'll help thicken it up a little bit too. But there we go. It's not going to hold the right amount here, so set that aside. But that's our recipe for today, a nice apple maple barbecue sauce. Now like I say, if you don't have maple syrup, by all means substitute a couple of tablespoons of honey and that'll work just fine. It just won't have the maple flavor to it. So I hope you've enjoyed today's recipe and you're looking forward to barbecue season. So, folks, that's our recipe for today, a nice apple maple barbecue sauce. And Goes well on just about anything, but my favorite thing to use it on is pork chops and chicken. But it's alright on steaks too. So I hope you've enjoyed today's recipe, and we'll give this a try. And like I say, if it's not thick enough for you after you've added the cornstarch, you can either just put it in the fridge and it'll tend to thicken up on its own, or you can, if you want to thicken it up faster, you can put it on the stove in a saucepan, bring it to a low boil for about 5 minutes, and then let it cool, and you can bottle it up. If you're a home canner, you can put it in a mason jar and of course can it according to your canning rules and regulations. But anyway, there you go. Remember, it's almost springtime on the prairies, and it's time to barbecue. And if you don't live on the prairies, well, it's probably getting springtime other places too. If you happen to be lucky and live in Hawaii or Florida or some tropical place, well, you can barbecue all year round, right? And those of you in Florida, I think you're still in summer, you're towards the end of your summer coming into fall now, so you're probably been barbecuing all along. The last time I barbecued this time of year was last year. If you want to check it out, it was a video titled "Show Us Your Steak," and I actually bundled up in my winter gear and stood out in the snow on my deck and barbecued a steak. Not something I do all the time, but it was for a worthy cause. So if you haven't checked that video, I encourage you to check it out. Alrighty, until Friday when we do our shout-outs, our story, and groaner of the week, have a great week and take care, stay safe.